Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With the latest WWE edition of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and the build to WWE Crown Jewel is officially underway. We are going to break down everything that happened over the last week across SmackDown and Raw, and we will dive into a couple additional topics as well with only 4 hours of WWE television this week. Let's not waste any time off the top of today's show. Allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So please, folks,
stop being marks for yourselves and go back to being a mark for me.
Go back to being marks for the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, Vintage, Chris Vanini, and the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. It has been a little bit since we've gotten one of those 5-star reviews, but I'll tell you folks, we are super close to 500 total reviews. So if we get all of those in, I promise we will cut down on these mentions every podcast. That said, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show, and we, of course, do our best to include them in our broadcast. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well. For $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. And we have not one, but 2 brand new Getting Overheads that I want to shout out. The first, Paul C., who signed up as a monthly subscriber, said, when I got back into wrestling in early 2021, this podcast helped me catch up and understand all the relevant storylines. Now it is a must listen for me every time a new episode hits. Paul, I appreciate that. We also got Tim A., who joined up as a yearly subscriber. I love your guys' analysis, commentary, and depth of knowledge of the business. I love the way you put over female and black talent. You guys are great. Keep up the great work in 2024. This is the wrestling podcast we need. Tim, that is the comment that I need. So Tim and Paul, We both appreciate you guys subscribing and signing up. And you know what? We acknowledge you.
Acknowledge.
Big acknowledgement right there.
Acknowledge.
Love when people subscribe, love when people leave reviews, but when they're meaningful, like both of those guys just shared with us, it kind of hits a little bit different, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, like we always say, it's nice to hear from people and know we're not just talking into the void.
Right.
And whenever we hear from you on reviews or comments or last words or any of that stuff, greatly appreciated, and especially again to those subscribers.
Yeah, I know we don't do, live streams of the shows or Twitch or anything like that, so we don't get that immediate back and forth feedback. And I know some of you have pitched us. It's actually happened a few times. You guys should do a Discord and you guys should do this and that. I've thought about doing a Discord when it comes to buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. And if that is something that interests you guys for, more complete interaction and would perhaps motivate you to subscribe, then that is something we could certainly institute. But the feedback that we get is via email, Twitter, and certainly the questions and comments for the show. And, Chris, it's unfortunate for you. You don't really utilize our Twitter, right? Like, I have access to all these things, so I see even more than you do. But when we do get the feedback, and it's not just positive feedback, there's occasional criticisms. I don't understand why you guys felt this way, or can you please explain your take on this more? I like that too. It's knowing that we have this, significant and consistently growing base of listeners and followers and subscribers. That is one of, I think, Chris, the motivating factors to do this, beyond the standpoint of we have an outlet to, bitch and complain and praise professional wrestling, which is always positive.
Yes, I joined this podcast because I wanted to talk wrestling with somebody.
Yeah.
And when that includes the listeners, all the better.
Yeah, that's the reason I joined the original podcast that I was on, In This Corner with Brian Campbell. It was because they were giving me the chance to talk about wrestling when I was previously, either typing online to someone or texting my one friend who still watched. All of a sudden, thousands of people are hearing my opinions and strangely agreeing with most of them. So, that's it feels good. So we want that feedback. We want the listeners and the followers and the subscribers. And I don't say this much on the show as well, but tell your friends. If you post to Reddit or you tweet, retweet the show, not just like the show when we send those out, retweet them, retweet some of the stuff that we post. When people are asking for podcast recommendations on Reddit or anywhere else, suggest they're Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We want to keep growing. We want to deliver you some of the items and features that you all want as part of the show, whether that's YouTube, whether that's Discord, whatever the case. But in order for us to do that, we need to continue growing. So with that off the top, we have a ton to discuss on today's show, as we always do. The main event, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and if there's time, the last word are all coming up.
But I'm afraid I've got some news.
And you know what? I don't even know if this entire segment is a news segment this week, Chris. It's more just a bunch of stuff I want to talk about that is not happening on television. First, and maybe I'm the only one who cares about this, but WWE ran Greenville, South Carolina for SmackDown on Friday. This week, it will be in Columbia, South Carolina, home of the Gamecocks. That's back-to-back weeks in the same state. Now, maybe this is minor or unimportant to some. I find it strange. It's not like we're talking about North Carolina, which is a much bigger state with literally twice the population. I checked. South Carolina is the 23rd most populous state in the union, and they aren't even running the biggest town in the state in either of these weeks, which is Charleston, by the way. I found it curious when WWE announced it Friday night. Week apart, same small state. I'd venture to guess few to no talent actually live there. You may not even have thoughts on it. I wanted to bring it up.
I didn't notice that. It is interesting because they're only an hour and a half apart.
So it's the same group of people that theoretically would go to the shows too. You're trying to sell tickets to, a truncated audience.
Yeah.
Potential audience.
I don't know. I've been to South Carolina, been to Myrtle Beach, love the state. Going to two similar places within a state in a week would be weird for almost any state. That's why
almost any state, but there are you could easily do Cleveland and Columbus, Ohio. It's a
right, but they usually do that Raw and SmackDown.
They usually do it
SmackDown and a SmackDown.
Correct.
That's why it's weird.
And on top of that, it's a much bigger state, and those are different audiences. You can do Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, right? You can obviously in Florida go to 6 different cities and be totally fine. New York and New Jersey, you have options there. But South Carolina, it's a legitimate small population to do 2 significant wrestling television shows. I just found that's why I found it weird. So at least I'm not completely alone, even if you maybe didn't think I should have even brought it up on the show. Speaking of SmackDown, it feels to me, Chris, like the show is turning a corner. I'm not sure why it took moving to USA Network to do it because the restrictions aren't that different, but the show has been way more compelling. And it's involved way more talent than it has pretty much all year. Certainly Logan Paul dropping the United States Championship was part of it. But it's up and down the entire roster, really. The women's division and the tag team division have both become more interesting, along with the main event and mid-card for the men. Both of those are getting deeper. And it has nothing to do with Roman Reigns either. I have found the last 2 episodes of SmackDown to actually be apples to apples better than the Raws that preceded them. And that is not a comment that we've made much in 2024.
I would agree. I would say Roman Reigns is part of it. I'm not saying he's the only reason.
So let me clarify. He's part of the show, being even better, but he's not part of improving those divisions is what I was trying to explain.
Sure. Yeah. No, the everything you mentioned, tag team, women's division, it's been better. So maybe it just takes a channel change to kind of refocus everybody.
Kick in the ass.
And you do better. But yes, it has been better the last couple of weeks.
Now, when it comes to Raw, it almost feels like it's headed in the opposite direction. It looks like the tag team division may get some life coming up, even if it's less exciting team-wise than SmackDown. But other than that, it feels like there's no interesting challengers for the men's champions. The women's division has been dead for months. Really, no one besides Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan matters in that division as a singles competitor. It's actually kind of wild that the show has changed so quickly, and I actually don't blame it on the shift to 2 hours because these issues have been bubbling up for a while. It just wasn't until after Bad Blood that I think they became super apparent, and certainly not having Drew McIntyre and CM Punk is hurting the show as well.
Yes, there has been a bit of a dip in star power, and on both shows, you don't have your champions, your top world champions, doing anything interesting. But SmackDown at least has Roman Reigns doing something. Raw just doesn't have the A storyline, in Raw hasn't been anything. Judgment Day storylines have been sliding.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have challengers for the men's title, and now you're cutting it to 2 hours. I actually thought this week's Raw paced better than the first one.
Yeah.
Last week, so that was a step up. But I think just utilizing the talent that is there has not been great for a bit, and we've criticized this for several weeks, and even around Bad Blood and everything else. One
correction there, when you were talking about the main event divisions, obviously on Raw it's an issue right now, especially with CM Punk not there, but on SmackDown, Cody does have a storyline going with Kevin Owens and Randy Orton simultaneous to what he's doing with Gunther. I think you were probably just thinking about Raw when you said that. But what was so interesting in the point that you just made is that a taped edition of Raw was paced better and largely more entertaining than the live version last week, which is so rare to actually occur. I'm not saying that I loved Raw on Monday night. In fact, it being taped actually presented numerous issues for me. But apples to apples against the live one from a week ago, the first 2 hour Raw, it was paced better, more happened, and you just felt more complete at the end of those 2 hours.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it was taped. So I guess that's a credit to
there you go
to doing a good job with it.
Yeah, St. Louis back to back, and they ran 4 consecutive hours of TV on location. Moving on here. Shinsuke Nakamura. We've been waiting to say his name on the show. He is set to fight Uka Sakazaki of Pro Wrestling Noah on New Year's Day in Japan. Nakamura has actually been wrestling at WWE live events, including this Sunday. He lost to LA Knight in Wales, but he has not been on TV since April. I still do not understand why they have had nothing for him on TV for 6 months. If someone is not in storylines for 2 or 3 months, okay, that can happen. Rotating talent and storylines, it can actually be good for people to get time off like that. But half a year, I just don't get it at all. Nakamura would actually be a believable heel to take the title off LA Knight later this fall. And I'd love to see him factored in with Andrade, Carmelo Hayes, all these guys. They're upping the work rate of SmackDown and putting good wrestling matches on and improving the mid-card. That is the perfect person to include in all of that. He would fit immensely well into the scene, especially now, Chris, with AJ Styles out.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been a big Nakamura guy, so I haven't been like begging for him to get back on my screen. But now that he is back wrestling, it is interesting. And it feels like, you know, with AJ, well, I guess AJ's health status TBD, but it feels like you could find something for him to do. So it is surprising.
You would think so. And speaking of Styles, it does appear as if the Liz Frank injury is real. He confirmed it on social media. He did not address the severity, so we're left wondering, of course, whether it's going to be 2 or 3 months or the majority of the year that he will be missing. This injury has taken NFL players out for 9 months, 12 months. It's ended careers previously. It's just not a great ailment to have. It's midfoot, very difficult to rehab. He's 47. He's talked about hanging up the boots. He looked amazing and wrestled quite well earlier this year. I mean, those 2 matches with Cody Rhodes were fantastic. I would really like to see him get a significant final run with a world title as part of it. He also does probably need to have another match with John Cena. And what's interesting is on that note, if Styles is going to call it quits at some point in the next year, depending when he gets back, WWE may actually wind up running concurrent farewell tours in 2025, because obviously you have Cena coming back in January, and then you're going to want to run the Styles story as well. I just hope, if that's what ends up happening, even if it wasn't planned, that Styles, of course, doesn't get overshadowed in a significant way, though with Cena, it might be unavoidable.
Yeah, and it is, Styles had said he doesn't want to go out with people thinking, oh, that's not AJ Styles. He wants to go out on top. So an injury like this can really, really impact what those plans are, depending on how he's able to come back. So hopefully it's sooner than later, and hopefully it's not that severe. But that does create an interesting timeline.
It does indeed. And we'll wrap up with this. WWE gave kayfabe security camera footage of an incident from SmackDown, we're going to talk about it in a moment, to Sports Illustrated, which they presented basically as real, saying they obtained it from like a third party, I guess was the insinuation. On one hand, Chris, I credit WWE for trying something different. And I also understand that the SI of 2024 is not what we grew up reading. On the other hand, the idea of legitimate media presenting handed over WWE content as obtained material and playing into the kayfabe of it all, it does irk me, given, what we do for a living. What do you think about it?
Two different things. One, it was nothing.
It was also
the
nothing.
Video itself, it wasn't anything like
it was a waste of time. Yeah,
it was a waste of time. But two, in our line, you do kind of cross that path of how you're supposed to treat this stuff.
Right.
I was at the WrestleMania media day when AJ Styles and LA Knight got into a fight.
Right.
And which was not, it wasn't a real fight, but they did slam each other on the ground, and AJ Styles got a bloody nose.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a fun way to get the video out in a guerrilla type of marketing way. I thought that was brilliant, and I couldn't believe they didn't use that in a WrestleMania promo video.
I know, that was so dumb.
They never talked about it on TV.
I know.
Even though it was a really, really cool idea.
It was so frustrating.
But that's sort of like something happens and you kind of get us to
Mm-hmm.
share it. That's different than giving someone a video and saying, here you go, post it. And we know WWE does this all the time with news, with Hall of Fame inductions and stuff like that. But doing it via storyline, to me, is just kind of weird. Maybe you could have done like ESPN or Stephen A. Smith or something like that, someone who's kind of a kayfabe character himself. I didn't see which reporter from SI publish it, but they do legitimate wrestling journalism there. Justin Barrasso.
Right. Yeah, I don't think he posted it. I think it was like their social account, and then they had a regular writer just put it on their website.
Okay, yeah. But in general, us in the media, we're not trying to advance storylines or be part of storylines. And that's kind of a line you don't really want to cross deliberately.
I think the differential that you set up there with your comparison was perfect. If you are WWE and you set up a contrived kayfabe viral moment, such as what they did with Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens after Bad Blood or during Bad Blood.
Yeah.
And then what they did with AJ Styles and LA Knight in the example you gave, and you use the media or people to make something go viral guerrilla style, that's totally fine. That's perfectly cool. It's the media kind of, and it's usually individuals. Hey, look what just happened in front of me. This is pretty cool, and I was able to witness it. Handing over material and having a media outlet say they obtained it as if they got it from a third party, playing into the kayfabe of it all, like it's actually security camera footage when it's just a camera that's positioned in a certain way and then edited with a filter to look like security camera footage. That is kayfabe. And to me, we got to be better than that. I'm saying we overall as sports media, wrestling media, whatever bucket you want to throw it into. So I wanted to say that off the top. It's not to be critical of any individual outlet. It's more just the practice and the way it was executed. I just didn't particularly love it.
And on WWE's part, do whatever you want. That's
Yeah,
their prerogative.
for sure. Try whatever you want.
This is more us talking about Sports Illustrated and from the media perspective.
Although there is a certain pressure. I mean, it is fair to say there's a certain pressure if WWE was to come to, I'm not saying you or I, but a journalist, a media member, a company, and say, we want you to do this. And you're like, well, it's WWE. They're giving us something exclusive. Like, why wouldn't we do it, right? And look, it's not a hidden feature of media in the United States that there can be a quid pro quo to it all. You establish a good relationship, whether with a company or a person. You help them out with one thing, you get something out there that they might want, and you get something else, right? Devontae Adams got traded from the Raiders to the Jets today. It's quite possible that he had contract issues and he gave those to a media member. Hey, get this out there for me. I'll let you know when I get traded. And then, trade time comes or he signs with a new team and he gives that same media member, information to that end. So it's not an unusual practice per se. When it comes to kayfabe and fake, storylines,
right.
That's kind of where you have to be a little bit tougher with your level of integrity, journalistic integrity, to kind of make those decisions. I mean, it's not lost on anyone that when WWE does its Hall of Fame class releases, they're giving that information to all these individual outlets. But that's newsworthy information. This person is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. If they were to give the Rey Mysterio, Dominic Mysterio Thanksgiving beatdown video to like TMZ, even TMZ, and they posted it as like, this is a real thing that happened, I would say the exact same thing.
Yes. Yep. It's the fact that it's not real. It's the fact that you're presenting it as real when you say obtained and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And the fact that, again, the video was nothing. It
wasn't even worth it.
Yeah.
That's probably, maybe, I don't want to say it's the worst part of it all, but it certainly didn't help. All right, look, we got a ton to talk about from television this week, SmackDown and Raw. We're going to get to all of it. You also know we're going to kick it all off by sliding into the main event.
This is the main event.
Now, normally I tell you whether it's a 1-part main event, a 2-part main event, whatever the case might be. This is like, I don't even know, an 8-part main event. It's all a bunch of storylines that flow into each other across SmackDown and Raw. So let's just get right to it and break it all down. Jimmy Uso actually opened SmackDown. Chris, is it just me? Or every single time I hear the start of this guy's entrance theme, carnival music pops into my head? Before you answer, for reference, let me play it. Now, I don't dislike the theme, but that entire intro, it screams carnival music to me.
I see what you're saying. I've never thought that. I don't think that when I hear it.
Okay.
I actually like it better than Jay's music, because Jay's is just a repurposed version of the Usos theme, which was better than Jay's theme. So I'm going to disagree. I guess when you think carnival, you think like organs, kind of. That's the idea, and that is kind of how it starts.
I don't know, man. It's just, I would start with the Uso. I would just skip that entire opening.
No, I like the opening.
Okay.
It's unique. There's nothing else in wrestling that starts like that.
All right. To each their own. Jimmy reminded how Solo Sikoa took him out, so he promised to kick his ass. Roman Reigns interrupted at that point with Michael Cole calling him the original Tribal Chief. I could have sworn we got past this to only Tribal Chief like I wanted. How can they not see only as better than original? I guess they're just thinking about it like OG, original gangsta. But in this context, that gives credence to Solo's claim as the current Tribal Chief, which they should not be giving credence to. Anyway, I digress. I know I'm getting off topic here. Roman held out his hand for the mic. He accepted it with affection this time. He asked Greenville to acknowledge him being Jimmy, who did some great character acting, cheesing at it, then trying to be serious, then cheesing again. He also held out his hand for the mic, but Roman just slapped him 5, which I thought was pretty damn funny. Reigns admitted that he's not the wise man who comes up with all the plans, but he claimed to be the Tribal Chief who takes what's his and remains the GOAT. Jimmy countered that Roman is missing his tribe and his Ula Fala, saying they need help and he knows one person who can help them. The fans chanted yeet. Reigns replied, no yeet. Jimmy pointed out he's the only one left who acknowledges Roman before dipping out. He, of course, being Jimmy. It kind of ended on a flat note, but that was also the point, dramatic effect. And I'd say it landed well enough, but just perhaps not all the way. The part of this I loved was the insinuation that Reigns is still delusional enough to believe it's his decision. Jay left them on his own volition after years of abuse. Roman just deciding he wants Jay back when he comes to that realization, that's not going to cut it. Perhaps Jay and Jimmy make amends quickly, but the Roman bridge was burned and needs to be completely rebuilt. Reigns will have to go make amends, perhaps a grand gesture even, of some kind, to bring them together, and that's exactly how it should be. There's also the potential story where perhaps Reigns said no yeet, not because he doesn't want Jay, but because he knows subconsciously he pushed him too far, and it's either going to be too difficult or too unlikely to get him back in the fold. It never made sense for Reigns to simply go full babyface because the other bloodline is evil and fans want him back. Instead, existing as a tweener who remains in denial and needs to learn that the ends don't always justify the means, especially when it comes to family, that's perfect. It's also great that they didn't wait until after Crown Jewel to get this going. There are 7 weeks left until War Games. So this served as an impactful, story-driven kickoff with a lot still to come involving all of these guys.
I think you put a lot of good explanation there and subtext that I did not think actually came across in that segment.
Interesting. Okay.
I thought it was kind of a mess, kind of all over the place. Didn't really have a focus. They talk about how they used to have a bunch of cars and money and stuff like that. And I'm like, are we supposed to feel bad for you right now? like what is it? And then it ends abruptly.
Mm-hmm.
You're right that Roman did act like the tweener here. The problem is he hasn't acted like a tweener the last several weeks that we've seen him. You know?
I don't know that I agree with that, actually. He hasn't been a pure babyface.
When him and Cody were face to face, you know, he would say, like, you know, get out of my way and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Stuff, but he's not. But it wasn't like, it was more just being confident and tough. It wasn't being heelish. And then didn't do anything with Cody. And he talked when he had his first solo promo with the fans. I think it was last week. Very babyface like. And so this kind of felt like he was trying to figure out the in-between. And I was like, I don't know if I like the in-between. And I don't know if he's ready to go full face, the old face Roman. We got it. Felt like sometimes he was trying to pull that out. And I was like, I don't know if we're ready for that. So it was funny when he said no yeet and the way he said it. I'm glad that they addressed the Jay thing straight up and we're just getting into it. That I think that is fine. But this just didn't hit. It didn't get across what you explained extremely well. And I think that's what it needed.
I do agree that what I just broke down was kind of taking it to the next step, right, from what they gave us. But the point I was largely making is this was kicking off what would be to come. Like what's coming next is everything I just talked about. So I was looking at it from, okay, this is the very beginning of Reigns needing to now go and make amends and bring everyone back in the fold. Obviously, that didn't happen yet. It's just the entree into it, right? You can't have Jimmy come out there and say, we need to go get Jay. And Roman be like, yeah, you're right. Let's bring him back in. Like, there has to be more to that. So
no,
him denying
you can have
was for all those
Roman
reasons.
better explain the why. He didn't really.
But that's the point, though. There's 7 weeks left, right? And
sure,
we got a little bit of advancement on Monday, which we'll talk about at the very end of this segment. But the reason why nothing is actually happening is twofold. 1, time. 2, logic. We just discussed recently how I'm actually forgetting what feud it was. It may have even been AEW now that I'm thinking about it. But something went from like non-existent to a major match or storyline in like 2 weeks. And that should pretty much never happen. When you're dealing with something like the Bloodline, which obviously is now a burgeoning on 5-year story at this juncture, it's all about exposition. And it's all about how do you get to those major moments. When Jay reunites with Jimmy, that's a moment. When Jay reunites with Roman, that's a moment. How do you get from point A to point B? There's going to be a lot of subpoints in between. It's really point A to point Z. That's what they're basically trying to do. And by kicking it off in this manner with a very basic, which I really think is what you're getting at, it was basic. With a basic entrance into this part of the storyline, I think it's exactly what they needed to do, especially given the fact that there's a complication here, Chris. And that is Jay being on another brand and holding the Intercontinental Championship on that brand. His character doesn't need this drama in his life. It should take moving the world to get him back in the fold. And they need to do it in a way, once it is ultimately accomplished, where he's not clearly second fiddle to Reigns like he used to be. He actually needs to come back into the fold as more of a 1B to his 1A, just given his stature now. Jay cannot be diminished rejoining the Bloodline. The benefit of going with Jay first and him being on Raw is I thought, hey, it's going to make the potential recruitment of Sami Zayn easier. You would think, given they just teamed, if Cody Rhodes was going to be on this team, he would have been recruited first. So that puts me back in the mindset, and we discussed this last week, of who do we actually want joining Roman and Jimmy. It puts me back in the mindset of full new Bloodline versus original Bloodline, which is how it should be. And it's quite possible that they even need Paul Heyman to come in and bridge that huge gap. So his return could be forthcoming in the next few weeks as well. That is why I was okay with this being basic and just kind of kicking it off.
I just didn't think their explanation for what they want was great.
Mm-hmm.
They want Roman to just be able to come in and do whatever he wants, and they want their cars and houses back. Like that was a weird way to kick it off of like, all right, we got to get back to where we were. We got to do this. I want to have my family back together. Like it wasn't I want my championship, because Bloodline doesn't have that. What they want was not explained.
He wants power.
Clearly.
He wants his power back. Yes,
right.
It was explained. That was the one thing they did explain, actually. I disagree with you.
But that's also not like a thing that like fans are gonna like cheer for. Yeah, we want Roman to have his power. You know, it's like I can't really connect to that.
I mean, I'm going to disagree with you from the standpoint of they're literally chanting OTC. Like
they're chanting OTC because you give people 3 letters and they'll chant it, and they love Roman Reigns.
I mean, that's a totally fair point, but they are chanting. I'm going to call it only tribal chief. I mean, they're wanting this guy. When he picked up the Ulafala a few weeks ago, they went crazy for that when he started putting it around his neck. That's going to be another moment when he finally puts the Ulafala back on. They want him to have that power.
That was the story, but it's the Ulafala. That's what we said a few weeks ago when the Wild Samoans died, which was that can be the storyline. He wants that necklace back and what that represents for the family. Like that I get.
But that's what it represents power.
I want to come back. I want to come back with Jimmy, and I want to just have control over everything. It's like it's a weird thing to like go for. Especially if you're not the heel.
I was less bothered by that than Jimmy just saying, I know a guy, and then fans chanting yeet. I thought he should have said, look, it's going to be difficult, but we need to do it. Like they have to note, and maybe that'll happen this week, right? Because of what happened on Raw, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But Jimmy needs to kind of almost relate to Roman at this point. Hey man, this is not going to be as easy as I thought. We have a lot of burned bridges that we need to repair and rebuild here. And Roman saying, hey, that's up to him, not me. Like I didn't do anything wrong. Like they have to get into the depth of that story. And it's one reason why. And Chris, I've said this multiple times over the last 4 years, not just recently, but 4 years. We never get anything from Reigns outside of the arena, with the exception, of course, of the build to Bad Blood that they just recently did. But I'm talking about with the family and stuff. Why has there not been a segment where like Jimmy visits Roman at his home and says, hey man, you're not at TV for the next couple of weeks, but we got to go over X, Y, and Z. Send a camera over to Reigns. I forget where he's living now, if he's still in Pensacola or he's down in the West or South Florida region. But they got to be able to kind of tell this story without sending Reigns to TV, since he's not going to make 1 million appearances. And instead, what they do so frequently is Roman goes away and then he comes back 5 weeks later and they just pick up where they left off. And that is not going to be successful given they have 7 weeks left and they have a lot of story to tell to get to the War Games match.
Well, yeah, I'd love for them to do a million more things with Roman. It's just not what they do. So we'll see.
But I'm saying that's a nice way to kind of bridge the divide between not having him travel, but still telling the story.
Yeah, I'll say it again. Get the family together. Get Rikishi involved. Like, do some things.
I don't think anyone wants to be involved with Rikishi. Guy's spouting out at the mouth about a lot of stuff recently in
That's
WWE.
true. That's true.
But I wanted that for 3 years and just recently didn't. I don't want this to get lost before we move on. Roman looked super fit during this segment. I don't know if you've noticed this. He's not like Seth Rollins CrossFit Jesus level, but it's like splitting the difference between Rollins and his super buff look that he had during his title reign. I thought it made him look more intimidating just facially. And I don't know if people are picking that up, but dude looks healthy as hell.
I actually did not notice or look, but maybe because he's still wearing the t-shirt, but that would make sense. You know, when we have that time off.
Yeah.
So I'll check him out next time.
We'll look up some pictures while we're talking, but he trimmed down in his face too. It was really interesting. All right, we got a lot more to talk about here. So later backstage, still on SmackDown, Jimmy walked by Cody Rhodes, who thanked him for Saturday. Big Jim, as he's now called, said Bad Blood was a favor, but there won't be more of those. There was mutual respect after that. As the scheduled women's tag team championship match was beginning, they were doing entrances. Kevin Owens ran out of the crowd wearing a Dusty Rhodes t-shirt, mind you. Hope you didn't miss that. And he grabbed a mic saying he was told not to attend SmackDown. His mic got cut off. So then he grabbed Corey Graves' headset saying he didn't turn on Cody. Cody turned on him. Rhodes stormed out trying to go after Owens, only for security in suits to get between them. Randy Orton then showed up. He calmed Cody down briefly. He went into the ring to do the same to KO. They got into a shoving match. Orton, his body wound up behind Owens, and Owens felt someone on his back, so he flung an elbow backwards, nailed Orton in the face. So Randy just struck him because he was angry, and Owens sold it as if he had been betrayed like by his best friend of a million years. It was only while all this was happening that Cole actually explained what happened after Bad Blood to the fans.
Yes.
Orton and Nick Aldis calmed Rhodes down outside his new tour bus. Aldis said he needs Cody focused on Gunther in 3 weeks, while Randy said he would talk to Kevin. He would fix everything, smooth it over. Aldis made a sarcastic comment about Orton finally becoming the voice of reason, which is pretty funny when you think about it, just giving his entire career arc up to this point. Then later, before the main event, Aldis saw a brawl happening. He found Owens straight up laying into Orton on the ground in the loading dock, saying Randy chose the wrong side. So much for playing mediator there, Viper. But that, of course, was the footage we were talking about that eventually got released to SI. This was all excellent, start to finish, and it was exactly how I hoped it would all go down when we discussed it last week. It would have made no sense to try and hide the story on Monday, only to make it a natural part of the show on Friday. The way this was executed, KO broke a suspension, and the WWE champion went right at him, leaving commentary with no choice but to explain the context. The Orton involvement, it was unexpected in that manner, and it was made even better when they got to the bus and then again with the attack. I did not expect KO to go 100% scorched earth this quickly, especially given, how he was claiming it was all Cody's fault and didn't expect Orton to be involved right out of the gate. KO sold the perceived betrayal so incredibly well in his emotions after the punch. And then when he was beating down Randy, just yelling at him, it's almost not a heel turn so much as it is a mental break where he just had enough and couldn't take it anymore. So I thought they executed this incredibly well on Friday night.
Yeah, I think that all worked. It all made sense. I think still, I'm waiting for like the big Kevin Owens promo when he like fully explains.
He still hasn't spoken. Yeah, you're right.
Right. We haven't gotten that yet. And so this is like you said, it's not really a heel turn. It's more just him breaking. And we know why. Like he hasn't said it, but we kind of get why. I'm just dying to hear from him because I think like in a lot of ways you could say he's in the right. Like he's not necessarily crazy for this. It's the same way that Jey Uso, nobody trusted Jey Uso when he came over to Raw because everybody had problems with the bloodline. And he made amends for it. Cody hasn't really done that. He kind of just feels like he's the champion and can kind of just do what he wants. And I understand Kevin Owens being upset by this, and I'd love for him to say that. But this was good stuff. A different way of doing it. And it's been working.
What do we always say? The best heels are justified and logical based on their beliefs. And that's exactly what Owens is doing here. And of course, the logic part is the entirety of Owens' character at this juncture. Like I just said with the Bloodline, given there's nearly 2 months until a potential title match between KO and Cody, or maybe even a triple threat with Orton, this was the perfect way to advance the plot in a quick but notable segment while running 2 concurrent storylines. This one that matters for television, and Gunther, which does not matter. Maybe the idea behind the Orton attack was to write him off for a bit. In theory, Cody could beat KO and Randy could return realizing Owens was right the entire time, which would allow that feud to happen immediately on the back end. Maybe you do one at Survivor Series, the other at Saturday night's main event. I was trying to find a spot here to be critical of this because we talk about the positives and the negatives of every story. I actually struggled. It was pretty much perfect. This was like a good sauce or chili, right? The more time it gets to cook in the pot, the better it's going to be, and the more of it we're going to want. And that's how I left Friday night.
Yes, I want more. I want to hear from more people. And I want to see their interactions, which we got on Raw. So yeah, that's what you want for sure.
One other reason this hit so well for me on Friday is because Aldis runs a relatively tight ship on SmackDown. So you don't see total chaos on Friday as frequently as you do on Monday, where it's basically commonplace at this point. And something else I'm remembering about this KO turn just popped in my head. Remember a few weeks ago when he recounted all the times he's turned heel in the past, basically saying all of them were legitimate and logical, except Kofi Kingston, who didn't actually deserve it? That was basically setting the stage for this, suggesting Owens is clear-minded, he fully believes Rhodes has done this to himself, and that is absolutely true, given the storyline that you kind of laid out a second ago.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. It's why I want to hear from Kevin Owens, because he's so good on the mic at explaining things or spinning things the way he wants to, and they keep not giving him the opportunity to do so.
But that's the reason why you want to hear from him so bad, because we wanted to hear from him 5 weeks ago, and we haven't been able to hear from him.
Yes. And so I'd been saying I want Kevin Owens turning on Cody to be a moment, him turning on Randy to be a moment. Neither of them are a moment, but you can still get an all-time promo from Kevin Owens if given the opportunity.
Well,
I hope they do.
To disagree slightly, they're both moments. They just didn't happen blatantly on television.
They're not moments you're going to go back and watch and be like,
correct,
man, that was. We're leaking terrible video to Sports Illustrated.
Yes, I agree. They're not anything they weren't made memorable in any particular way. That's fair, but at the same time, I don't know that every single heel turn can be. It is a different way of going about it. You're right, though. There's no question about that. So the main event of SmackDown was Jimmy against Solo. Sikoa backstage thumbed the Ulafala, saying Jimmy may be his older brother, but he's his tribal chief. Jimmy was out by himself despite the entire bloodline alongside Solo. That allowed the heels to totally dominate. Sikoa hit a spinning heel kick and spinning Solo. Some fans understandably chanted, "We want Roman." Jimmy got a run only to get tripped up on the top rope by Tama Tonga, with Solo hitting Samoan Spike for the win. The Tongans attacked after the bell, with Reigns obviously saving. He took out the minions with 3 Superman punches, only to get destroyed by Jacob Fatu with a hip attack. Jimmy tried to save, but ate a moonsault from Fatu. Then the Tongans held Reigns' arms for a Samoan Spike to end the show. Jimmy leaned over a choking Roman after the bell, reiterating they need help and they need him, of course, him referring to Jay. This was, as far as I was concerned, easily the worst segment of this entire main event storyline on SmackDown that we just discussed. Whether you liked it or not, it was the bottom of all of them. It was an odd booking decision off the jump going with this match. Only 6 days after Jimmy's return, I thought they would play it out for a few weeks with Jimmy wanting to get at Solo for completely taking him out. They did preview it on the show. They showed us footage of all that. That was fine, but it just felt rushed is the best way I can put it. I guess with Reigns on limited dates, they had to run it here so he could catch another beating and get knocked out for a couple weeks. Really, Jimmy could have started by beating one of the Tongans. Like, they could have put him against Tama Tonga first, and Reigns could have saved, and then they could have had Solo beat Jimmy a couple weeks from now. Also, look, Roman not being ringside at the beginning was illogical. Okay, yeah, he's the GOAT. Yes, the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin did not sit ringside on the occasions they had someone whose back they were watching. But this was as obvious to anyone as a 4-on-1 situation. And this isn't Stone Cold saving Mankind. It's Jimmy and Roman, their family. At the least, Reigns should have come out when the blatant interference started, maybe resulting in a no contest. So I get what they were going for here. It just didn't really work for me. And on top of that, the match was boring as sin. If you were ranking all the Bloodline wrestlers in order based on ability, Solo and Jimmy are literally 2 of the bottom 3, with Tonga Loa the only one below them.
It would have made sense to maybe have a spot where Jimmy says he wants to do this match and Roman says, I don't know, man, like, let's take our time. Don't give him what he wants. And Jimmy's just like, nah, I'm going to go do it. As a reason to kind of explain. Jimmy's overexcited to do this. That's why the match is being rushed. That's why Roman's not out there right away.
That would have helped. You're totally right.
Would it just kind of would have leaned into the story. I'm okay with doing it because it's Jimmy. You could have done Jacob here as well, maybe, or maybe one of the Tongans. You want it to be a main event. So I'm fine with it. Like, it is in Jimmy's character to immediately come back and just want to get into a scrap with somebody, So I didn't mind doing it. I think you could have just added a little bit more to it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Now let's switch from SmackDown over to Raw. Cody opened hour 2 of Raw, profusely thanking St. Louis for starting We Want Cody chants that led him back to WrestleMania and the main event. Gunther obviously interrupted, but actually put Rhodes over for being the steward of wrestling's boom period because he's the quarterback of WWE and he put the industry on his back. He struggled to find criticism for Cody until, of course, he did. Cody tries to be everyone's friend. It's costing him with KO, and he wants him at full strength for Crown Jewel, not distracted. Rhodes retorted that he has plenty of enemies, and he's seen Gunther break when he's unable to put opponents away. He shared respect for Gunther, but said he hasn't gotten in the deep end with someone like him yet. Gunther called him a secondary champion. Cody reminded that he beat the most dominant champion in WWE history, and he's ready to slay another beast. Then he shook hands with Gunther, wishing himself luck. Gunther did. That was pretty funny. Not the most exciting segment, but also kind of exactly what it needed to be for a champion versus champion match. Both guys were presented in a strong light. They maintained their characters. The problem is not anything they did, but just the concept of the match and the blood money belt. But I'd say they kicked it off pretty well. The question is whether there's going to be any additional depth for them to reach, like we saw with the women, spoiler alert, or if it's just going to be surface level the entire time. But really, despite that, I did like the segment.
I was like, this is way too buddy, way too much putting the other person over for no reason whatsoever. It's been an issue since the Gunther street trash stuff with Damien, which was great. Mm-hmm. He has struggled to have real hatred towards somebody. He was just kind of mostly dismissive of Sammy the whole time.
Except Goldberg. Goldberg worked, but yeah.
Goldberg worked. Yes, Goldberg worked. But here I was like, oh, Cody, you're great. You're the quarterback. Yeah. I don't want that. Come on, man. I want to tell me Cody's nothing. Tell me Cody got lucky. Tell me you guys were the final 2 in the Royal Rumble a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Say, Cody, I'm pissed at you for taking my WrestleMania main event moment, and I'm going to prove that I should have been the one to get that. Give me some animosity here, man. I don't want to just putting each other over. I want you at full strength, yada, yada. No, if we're going to do this champion versus champion nonsense for a stupid belt nobody's going to care about, at least put some animosity behind it. I want some heat because there just hasn't been a lot of heat with Cody's stuff for a while in terms of his championship feuds. And I would like to have that if we're not putting the title on the line, at least.
It should have been me. It should have been me.
I don't disagree. That would have been a great story point to say, hey, I never would have lost to Roman Reigns the first time. So, yeah. You may be great. You may be leading this company, but I would have been doing it a year earlier than you would have. There's definite animosity that they could have ratcheted up by using a line like that. And I agree it could have been better. At the same time, for something this, boring, I guess is the best way to put it, I thought it was an okay kickoff. The question's going to be, are we getting them face-to-face regularly over the next 3 weeks or however long until Crown Jewel? If so, and there's further direction to go, great. If this is going to be the entirety of the build, then obviously that's going to be problematic. quick prediction for this. It kind of just came to me while you were talking. Cody's ready to beat Gunther. Owens interferes. Gunther wins the Blood Money belt. That's got to be the finish, right?
That makes sense. It makes no sense for Cody to get this belt. These belts, these types of things are heel things. That would set up Cody KO for obvious reasons, and it's an excuse to give Cody a loss.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
All right, cool. Now, there was one other brief item on Raw. Jey Uso randomly opened the door to a room. Maybe it was supposed to be his dressing room. I don't know. But his name wasn't on it. Jimmy was inside asking if he got a second. Jey gave him the cold shoulder and left. If it was his personal room, okay. Put the name on the door, something like that. 2 segments later, Jimmy was opening random doors in a hallway and found Jey, who was now fully dressed. Jimmy wanted to be heard out. Jey dissed him, turned his shoulder again. So Jey walked into a random room that didn't have his clothes, left, went into another room that I guess had his clothes, somehow showered and dressed in about 10 minutes, and Jimmy found him all in that time. Obviously, this played as story continuation coming out of SmackDown. And just judging it on its face, Jey wanting nothing to do with Jimmy, but also being disgusted at the sight of him, that's exactly how this should have gone for a first interaction. We just discussed all of this, but it's clearly going to be a slow burn. Despite all of that, Chris, I couldn't help being distracted by just the illogical and random setup, plus the entire presentation of it. Am I alone? Did you notice that, or is it literally just me?
I noticed it. I just didn't care because I thought it was a good idea in general. The idea that Jimmy, again, why is Jimmy fighting Solo so quickly? Jimmy just goes and does things. He doesn't sit around and wait. So like it would make sense for him to immediately go to Raw and try to find
No,
Jey,
that part's
right?
logical. That part's logical. I'm talking about Jimmy sitting in a nondescript room, and then Jey just happens to open the door and find his brother there.
They're in nondescript rooms all the time. Yeah, you could have said it was his
Put his name on the door.
know,
Put Jey Uso on the door. Intercontinental champion.
I didn't care about that as much because I was just interested in what they were doing. And I could look past that other stuff. And I did think Jimmy, he looked through like a lot of doors before he found Jey.
The second time he did, but again, okay. But you have to stay with me though. You're right that the second time he looked through a lot of doors before finding him. True. But it was a different room. He had his clothes and he was showered and dressed. And this was 10 minutes later. So finding him the second time was okay. He kept looking for him. That's cool. But why was Jey going into that other room if it wasn't his locker room? If it was, his clothes would have been in there. It just didn't add up to me.
I don't know. I don't know what that building's like. Maybe they got different rooms for different things.
Maybe they have one of those like bank teller things where like the clothes can shoot into a different room and you just have to call them and then you can get dressed.
Maybe he needed to get a shirt and that was where the backstage merch was. I don't know.
Now, taking this on a more serious tip, my curiosity is what's going to happen next, right? Does Jimmy go back to Roman and be like, hey man, Jay's not receptive. You may need to handle this. Or does Jimmy maybe think, if Jay's not even listening to me, perhaps I have to go through Sami Zayn to get in his ear? Because I just said a moment ago, a couple, conversation topics ago, that, hey, maybe they have to go through Jay to get to Sami. What if they have to go through Sami to get to Jay, and Sami needs to be the voice of reason? Because let's not forget, it was Sami who kind of convinced Jay to leave the Bloodline. So Sami convincing him to go back, or both of them even, to go back and help, that would be a nice parallel.
That would make sense. It just kind of goes, which one do you feel like should be the last one to join? And maybe that should be Jay.
I think it should be Jay, yeah.
But I also think Sami coming back has to be its own thing too. Like, I don't want to just see Jimmy and Sami talking and Sami being like, all right, yeah, I'll come back and help you. Like, I'm very curious how this goes. Like, I'm super interested in how they pull the Bloodline back together. So I don't know which way it's going to go. The idea of going to Sami first makes sense. But you have to work to get Sami too. Because Sami told Jay to leave for a reason.
Right.
Like he's not just going to be like, all right, I'm back in. So they kind of got to do it on multiple fronts. And I liked, again, that Jay was just like, nah, I'm not doing this.
Right.
So that sets up something is going to have to change his mind. And that is going to be a moment.
Sami has historically been the most forgiving and understanding. And he could even relate it to like him reconnecting with KO. This guy turned on me, more than you and your family have turned on each other. And yet we got back together. We won the tag team championships. If they're willing to make amends to you, then you need to be open to it. Like, I think coming from Sammy, it actually makes more sense than coming from Jimmy. The only person who it would make even more sense is if Reigns literally went above and beyond to, rebuild that bridge, whether that's saving him from losing the Intercontinental title, although that's kind of heelish to do, right? Or saving him from distractions and interference, maybe saving him from Braun Breaker cheating or something like that, whether it's Jimmy or whether it's Roman. They could do it directly, but the more and more I think about it, I think they have to get to Sammy first. It just makes more sense.
It could. Either way, I feel like Jay's return has to be a save. It's got to be a save during a beatdown. That's the classic wrestling moment.
Yeah.
The beatdown's happening, fans start chanting, yeet, yeet, yeet. Jay's music hits, crowd goes nuts. Just give me that.
What do you think about them playing it out all the way to War Games, where like they go into the match, Sammy agrees to join them, Jay's hesitant, he's not sure. Not that dissimilar from last year, where in War Games they didn't have a fourth guy, and then it ended up being Randy Orton. People thought it was going to be CM Punk. So they enter the ring. It's three of them. The match looks like it's about to start, and Jay comes in as the fourth person, last person.
I could see it. I just prefer it as like the Raw or SmackDown go home moment, where, Jay's here. Jay's going to help him out. We got War
it's better
Games
as a go
coming up
home
this weekend.
Yeah, it's better as the go home. You're right.
I like it as the go home more than the match, because the match is almost a little.
You're right. They're getting
the
beat
nose.
down 4-on-3. They're outnumbered. What's this going to be like at War Games? Jay comes out at the end, saves them. They stand tall, and they go into the show. Yeah.
They're doing a contract signing, and the Bloodline have decided we're just going to do 3. 1, 2, 3. They all sign. Beatdown happens. Jay makes a save. He signs a contract. Off we go.
Disagree with the contract signing, but I think we're pretty much saying the same thing. So
okay,
we'll move on there. Now, there were a lot of Raw SmackDown crossovers this week leading into Crown Jewel. And it's obvious these are going to continue, not just maybe for the next few weeks, but I presume throughout the build to Survivor Series, given what we're talking about with the Bloodline and they're being split across 2 shows. And I know there's going to be folks who roll their eyes and sarcastically say, well, so much for the brand split. But when 90% of the talent remains exclusive and the crossovers are limited to a 2-month span, I really have zero issue with it. The problem when it happened in the past was it was random for really no rhyme or reason. More than that, I actually think these days it's a smart move for WWE because they're going up against the NFL, college football, the MLB playoffs, and the start of the NBA season. So if for those 2 months every year for Crown Jewel and Survivor Series season, you have a little bit of crossover and you're getting your biggest stars on both of your shows, that's probably a really smart business decision. Now, that's not to say all of these crossovers went smoothly. There are 2 major issues. The first is the limited show runs. The more crossovers you do, the fewer people receive TV time. And that happened during Raw because there were multiple SmackDown talents on that show. The second issue was more specific to this week. Raw being taped first, but airing after SmackDown, which was live. That led to kind of some half-assed follow-up on Monday from storylines that developed Friday. And because of that, I thought Raw did suffer and wasn't as good or comprehensive as it could have been. So I wanted to get your general thoughts on slightly breaking, let's say cracking open the brand split for a short 2-month period with limited talent.
I mean, it makes sense because of the storyline. You have these crossover matches, and I'd rather see them face to face than not.
Right.
And then Jimmy wanting to go get Jay made sense as well. So as long as stuff happens, I'm fine with it. It's more when Cody makes an appearance on Raw and he doesn't do anything and he's just backstage, has a backstage segment. Then I'm like, all right, come on, let's do something.
Yeah.
But I thought this was fine. I had no problems.
Now, whether you do or don't agree about the crossover issue between SmackDown and Raw, you're probably just looking to relax and enjoy some of the latest vaporization technology on the damn market. Well, Student Glass is probably the choice for you. Student Glass is a 360-degree rotating glass infuser that generates kinetic motion activation through cascading water displacement, opposing airflow technology, and the natural force of gravity to provide the most powerful and efficient filtration experience on the market. And if that sounds cool, Go to studentglass.com and see it for yourself in action. The Tyson 2.0 edition of this gravity infuser was, of course, created in collaboration with legendary boxer Iron Mike Tyson. It is compatible with mixology, culinary, hookah, and aromatherapy, and it features a built-in percolation system that really delivers cool, water-filtered vapor. Best of all, it connects to any smoking or vaporization device with the right joint and carries a 10-year warranty. There are even red and black boxing glove globes that can be purchased to enhance the visual of this device. It is rock solid, legit, best in class, and you can get 20% off your first order on the website. Just visit studentglass.com, studenglass.com, and check it out today. So with that said, it is officially time to get into everything else that happened across SmackDown and Raw, and we're going to do it by breaking down the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And I'm sorry, Miss Rosie Perez, I call a spade, it just is what it is. But you can't give credit to anything dude says. Same dude to give you ice and you own some shorty. It's time to wake up the dead. You sound a little naive in them articles that I read.
Now, this is going to be an interesting version of the segment because there wasn't actually that much that happened across SmackDown and Raw in terms of number of different storylines, but all of them were pretty intricate, getting multiple segments. Nia Jax with Tiffany Stratton opened hour 2 of SmackDown. Nia gave Bayley credit for putting up a fight, but said no one can beat her, including Liv Morgan. Jax said she will annihilate Morgan. Then she grabbed Stratton really tight around the neck, like you would for a noogie, I guess, saying that's when it becomes Tiffy time and she can cash in Money in the Bank on Liv. I know it's just a plot point, but Chris, that's a legitimately good plan, even if she's just saying it as a heel. In reality, why would Stratton not completely go along with that? It's a best of both worlds situation. Nia retains and Tiffy gets the other title, right?
Yes, it made complete sense. I was like, wait, this is kind of weird. And then she explained it and I was like, oh, it's the most sensible thing I've heard from a pro wrestling heel in a long time.
Like, it's super smart. It's almost babyface. Hey, I'm a champion. I want you to be a champion too, friend. I'm going to help you do it. Yeah. Now, obviously, there's an ulterior motive. She doesn't want her cashing in on her title. But still, like, why? The titles are equal, right? One's not better than the other. So why wouldn't she want that? Anyway, exactly. I digress. Naomi interrupted, claiming Tiffy is helping Nia retain the title, and she's already beaten both of them. She got in her grill to challenge, but just as a match was about to be set, Liv, Dominic Mysterio, and Raquel Rodriguez all came out talking shit, and that just led to a match. We got Nia against Naomi. Now, this was a non-title match, as Aldis apparently said during commercial break. He also indicated that Naomi needed to earn her title shot. Judgment Day stayed ringside. Jax hit a hip attack of Naomi into the ring post on the apron. Naomi hit her leg scissors DDT, an apron split slam, and a similar move into the post. But Jax caught Naomi jumping off the barricade for a great Samoan drop ringside. Naomi came back with a slingshot tornado, only for Stratton to try and take her out. Rodriguez stopped it, so Naomi kicked Tiffy in the head. Nia got up on her, but Raquel distracted during Annihilator, and Morgan hit Jax in the back twice with the briefcase. That allowed Naomi to hit a huge powerbomb out of the corner, plus a high angle cover to beat the champion. I was going to say clean, but at least clean for her. She didn't do anything wrong. As Judgment Day celebrated, out of nowhere, Rhea Ripley's music hit. She destroyed Rodriguez into the barricade. Then she chased Morgan into the ring where she met Jax. Rhea booted Nia right in the face, pounded Liv until Dom distracted and everyone got out of dodge. Man, so much more happened here than I expected when that promo segment started. Initially, I didn't love the idea of going right into this match, but making it non-title and having Naomi win while actually adding relevance and storyline to the Nia-Liv feud, even if it's heel versus heel, that was actually super smart. Beyond that, the match was entertaining as hell with some huge spots, better, actually way better than the Bad Blood match with Bayley. It made Naomi a legitimate number one contender like we hoped would happen last week. We said that on this show. And then we got unexpected Ripley, which was a huge reaction from the crowd. I also forgot the stuff with Stratton that continued that arc and the eventual cash-in storyline down the line. I did have one key issue. It's twofold. Rhea had no business being at SmackDown because Unlike Liv's crew, she doesn't have a multi-brand match at Crown Jewel. She straight up just missed Raw for no reason in kayfabe last week, but knew Morgan would be there Friday. How? Then it bothered me how she just ran through Rodriguez. That's a more legitimate issue. Raquel being the heavy should give Rhea pause at a minimum, and really, their interaction should prevent Rhea from getting to Liv at all. But Ripley just plowed right through her, which I didn't like. She is being booked way, way, way too strong at this juncture. But aside from those, this was very good all around. And in totality, this got like 20 minutes at the start of the show, which is always positive.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of that. There were a lot of moving pieces here, and it all worked pretty well. Nia getting pinned again for the second time by Naomi. I don't love it, but WWE is not leaning on the, they champion, so then you get the title shot type of thing. They're not leaning on that too much. As a whole, they've just done it here a couple of times now. But that's okay. Naomi needs some wins. That's good. I do agree on the Raquel part. It would have made a lot of sense for Rhea to come out and Raquel just intercept her and just not get to Liv. You know, that sets the tone of what the heavy is and the bodyguard. And suddenly Liv is protected. Otherwise, What is Raquel doing there?
Exactly. Yeah, you're 1,000% right about that. And I actually agree with your point about Nia getting pinned twice, though in this case, she got hit twice with a briefcase and then took a massive powerbomb. So it was like, if you're gonna pin her, that's the way to do it versus just a double pin, which is what happened with Bayley and Naomi previously, didn't even set up a triple threat like we thought it was going to. Set up a number one contendership, which Naomi lost. You could argue it would have made a lot more sense even now as a triple threat. Bayley getting pinned at Bad Blood and Naomi being like, hey, I didn't get pinned. I still deserve a match. They could have done it that way. I didn't hate necessarily that they did it this way. What was your grade for it, though?
Good.
Now, I know this is kind of the opposite take from what I just gave with Cody and KO, but it's not really an analogous situation. I wish WWE was using the Liv Nia feud to give Liv Rhea time to breathe. Whereas Rhodes needs to continue the feud with Owens concurrently because otherwise he would literally be doing nothing on Fridays. Morgan and Ripley have been happening for like 6 months and they badly need a break given how much of it has fallen off. I know the fans are still in love with it and they're going crazy and that's cool. I'm talking about more from the creative aspect of it. I'd have loved if Raquel kayfabe injured Rhea and she took 2 or 3 weeks off because they need that time apart. And then you have Liv and Raquel focus on Nia and Tiffy. And you have something really interesting. Maybe Rhea comes back. She's looking for Liv and someone else gets in her way, like a Shayna Baszler or a Zoe Stark, and says, you're always worried about the title. You haven't fought anyone else on this show in months. How about you step up and go in the ring with me? Now you have a little bit of a storyline in between, and both people are doing different things. And then a month from now, they can rekindle the rivalry before Survivor Series.
Yes. And, we even had Rhea Priest on Raw. Like Rhea said,
well, we'll talk about that. Yeah, exactly.
We'll get to it, but like they made it clear, like Priest and Finn are done. Like they've
at least for now
moving on from that.
At least for now,
which is good. And we thought that's what we were going to get from Rhea Liv after Bad Blood as well. Now
we hoped.
Did the disqualification and the way that played out accidentally at Bad Blood keep this going? Maybe, but you're right that either way, I do kind of want to see a break from this, even though, again, crowd's going nuts for it. I get it. It's good business. I'm just kind of bored of it. But because of the DQ, Rhea does need another something here.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised we didn't just go right to it, do another match. Raquel interferes again, but the ref doesn't see it. Instead we're just kind of continuing the same stuff.
Just lost steam is all, and Raquel really should be helping it with the steam because she should be the person in between Liv where Rhea has to overcome her. Raquel beats her down a bunch, injures her, goes out. She gets revenge on Raquel. Then she finally gets revenge on Liv and wins the title back. But I don't know. The whole crown jewel aspect has obviously complicated it. And the fact that she ran through Raquel the first time they really went head to head certainly didn't help matters either. Now let's move to Monday night. Ripley opened Raw restating that their feud won't end until she wins back the women's world title. Stratton actually answered her in the ring instead of Morgan or Rodriguez. She was a messenger for Jax, telling her to mind her own business. Rhea threatened, only for both to get attacked by Liv and Raquel. The latter somehow botched a chokeslam with Tiffy, and Liv beat her with a briefcase with the heels standing tall. Now, Rodriguez has really just not been smooth since she's gotten back. Ring rust and all, I guess, but yikes. Ripley demanded a match. Adam Pearce refused unless she got a partner. Stratton ran in complaining, so Ripley reluctantly agreed to tag with her. Morgan later introduced Rodriguez to Judgment Day, and Carlito was so taken aback that he dropped his apple.
That's cool.
Then we got Rhea and Tiffy against Liv and Raquel. This main evented Raw, so the women bookended the show. Rhea hit Riptide on Liv for a broken fall. She tagged in Stratton, who missed prettiest moonsault ever. Ripley failed to get Rodriguez up for Riptide ringside, only for Jax to run them both over for a disqualification. She checked on Tiffy. Rhea hit a headbutt on Nia. By the way, she didn't sell it like a Samoan would, which I was disappointed by. But Liv took her out by the leg. She was trying to lift Nia into Riptide, which obviously is difficult. Liv takes her out. And despite originally saving Jax, Nia slammed Liv and then hit a leg drop plus Annihilator. And Nia points to Tiffy, the obvious cash-in opportunity. Eventually, Stratton comes to the realization of what she's talking about. And then Dominic Mysterio runs in, saves Liv, and ends Raw. I have a completely split mind on all of this. So stay with me here, okay? Let me start with this. The whole look from Nia, like, are you effing stupid? Cash in the briefcase? What are you doing? That was the best part of this entire double segment. It was one of my favorite parts of Raw in totality. It made me laugh out loud. The hand movements, the gestures, everything. She was excellent there. I didn't find either the opening segment or the match particularly compelling, though the fact that the women started and ended Raw plus got a ton of screen time was hugely positive on its own. I'm also pleased that, like with KO and Cody, WWE is continuing an ongoing story while the Liv Nia side quest for Blood Money in the Sand is happening. I just wish they did it in a way where there was the separation that we talked about earlier. It's okay to say that Rhea and Liv still hate each other, but they don't actually have to fight each other on Raw, at least not for a few weeks. My problem comes from the standpoint of Rhea and Liv needing a break like we just talked about a moment ago. You have KO and Cody, that's just starting to heat up. Liv and Rhea has already been hot. It actually needs maybe to take a break and then go back to it. I already kind of mentioned this, so I'm not going to repeat the whole point again, but she could start something with Baszler or Stark and just do something fresh and create new material for them before they both come back together. It's always difficult in wrestling when you are trying to do so many things at one time, but they're successfully doing it with the men. And with the women, they're kind of just not. They're just doing them mashed together. I think that's the differential between the two that I'm trying to point out. The other thing was that this was a bit clunky because they taped Raw before SmackDown, yet aired it after. And it's always difficult in wrestling when you do that and you're working in inverse order because you don't exactly know what ultimately will happen on that show, especially these days in WWE where things are not over-scripted like they used to be. I'm glad Raquel is involved. I'm glad they're working with other women. My problem is that it's main event women from the other brand instead of the entire roster on Raw, which barely gets featured and was not on the show Monday night at all. There was no Lyra Valkyria. There was no Zelina Vega. There was no Pure Fusion Collective. None of them. Now, I totally accept if a lot of you disagree with this grade. I actually ended up with a light bad for all of this. Not that it was poorly executed. Not that it was poorly scripted or conceptualized. It just didn't really excite me in any way.
I thought it was fine. I'd give it a light good. I think part of that bigger issue is when you do the cross-brand title matches and you're just going to fill up, you're going to do a segment on each show about it, and you've cut Raw to 2 hours. And as we said, the number one thing that's most likely to get cut is something like Pure Fusion Collective. Mm-hmm. And that's why the pacing of the show was better, I thought, on Raw, because they just kind of did fewer things. I don't necessarily know if that's good, but that is a reality of the situation. I already said my piece on Rhea Liv and that whole deal, but in terms of what we got here, I'd still give it a light good.
Yeah, totally fair. I understand that my grade on this one is probably an outlier, but just how I felt Monday night. Finn Balor backstage asked Pierce when he would get a rematch with Priest. Pierce instead focused on the heels defending the tag team titles with a number one contendership tournament to come. Priest later asked Ripley if she needed his help. She told him focus on regaining his title instead of Judgment Day, given he's taken down all the guys already. So we got the first tournament match, Alpha Academy against the War Raiders. That's right. The War Raiders are back. Not War Machine, not the original War Raiders, not Viking Experience, not the Viking Raiders. They are the War Raiders. Leather vests and all. No more Viking bullshit. Original theme, I believe, from NXT. This kicked off the tournament. The Raiders straight up dominated, as one would expect. They got most of a pop-up power slam and debuted I was going to say it's a new finisher. It's actually an altered finisher. It's called the Fallout, a mid-air toss splash. So Ivar basically hits a splash with Akira Tozawa's body in the middle of the air on a toss. They used to do that move with a leg drop. It was unfortunate the fans weren't all in for their return, but Eric had been out forever. Ivar was just starting to get over, you'll remember, as a singles competitor before he got hurt. I'm confident they're going to pick up support quickly. They looked great physically. Ivar was probably the smallest he's been in years. And normally, Chris, I would rail against another tournament of this kind. I'm okay with it in this specific situation because the Raw tag division badly needs to be rebuilt. Whereas SmackDown, of course, has made significant strides to that end, as we've pointed out over the last few weeks. But there has been zero movement on the Red brand. This could theoretically help not only develop a number one contender, but multiple feuds as well. And it could reinvigorate some forgotten about teams as they participate in the tournament. Beyond that, it's also nice to get a break from Balor and Priest, as we hoped the last time we conversed about it. It's what we just said we want them to do with Ripley and Morgan. It could be a swerve, but I hope there's at least 1 month of a breather between them. All of this was good.
I thought this all worked. Going back to the War Raiders deal.
Yes.
Good to have them. Good to have them back. Not surprised they didn't get a huge reaction. They're not a tag team that's like beloved or anything, even though I think they're great.
They are, just haven't been in WWE because of injuries and because of the name and everything that they did. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not an entrance that's going to get like a pop, you know. But this whole thing reminded me of just like the Viking Experience has to be one of the dumbest things that Vince McMahon had come up with in wrestling in his career. One of the dumbest things in wrestling in years. I still can't believe that happened for like a week or two or whatever that was.
It's just hard to place it. It's hard to place it because the name is so bad, but there have been so many like Doudrop and Butch. Like Triple H is one by one retconning all of these.
I can get that. The Viking Experience for a name makes no sense whatsoever.
Doudrop.
It's a Disney.
They called Piper Niven Doudrop and dressed her in blue,
but she
like
was
a raindrop.
She was given that name by Eva Marie as a diss. Like there was still like something behind it.
So because there was a kayfabe reason for it, I mean, it was still super insulting to her. Like,
but calling someone an experience is just wild. Anyway, good to have them back.
What about Shorty G?
But that also again kind of they like did something. Like he was that stupid thing. Speaking of Chad Gable though, he was right. Alpha Academy, they suck. He was right to ditch them.
They do. Yeah, he was right. He was.
They're not getting any better, and they just keep losing. And
well, look, it was always a low card group. It's great for house shows. I'm sure they get over massively, especially Otis at house shows and stuff. But yeah, like logically, and we said this really from the beginning, bringing American Made together, we'll talk about them later here, it always made more sense. It's the perfect group for him.
Yes, and we never got the Otis Chad Gable payoff.
Never got it.
And I'm still really upset about that. This is what I talk about with the Triple H era sometimes. Like they're not everything bad about Vince McMahon. He knew everything revolved around moments. That's what people remembered.
Right.
And there's just been these instances where they're not doing the moment, and that was one. But overall, I still thought this was good.
I think the biggest and most fair criticism of Paul Levesque's booking is he sometimes either misses the moment or delays it too far out where it doesn't have the same impact as it otherwise would. In this case, he completely missed the moment with Gable and Otis. And really, it's happened twice now with Gable because, as we've said, Gable should have been the one to beat Gunther for the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania. I only grow stronger in that belief the further away we get removed from WrestleMania. I believed it strongly then. I believe it even more strongly now.
Completely agree.
Did you drop a grade on this and I missed it? Was it good for you?
It's a good.
Okay. United States Championship, LA Knight defending against Carmelo Hayes. Andrade watched from the timekeeper's area. Ad break 1 minute after the bell. Knight hit his neck breaker and jump up elbow drop. Hayes did a handstand counter to a BFT. Then he landed a scissor kick and a lifted cutter coming back. Andrade stood, distracting Melo as he went for nothing but net. He missed, and they did a pretty good counter sequence for Knight that ended with flipping Melo over his back for a BFT to retain the title. You could argue it's the best BFT he's ever hit. Andrade ribbed Hayes, saying put the fries in the bag, which was the line, of course, that started their backstage brawl. The finish made the match as far as I was concerned. I thought it was otherwise just relatively okay. Melo sold his ass off, though, once again, which will do him well long term. LA works best with wrestlers of a similar vein to him, and Melo is not that. Andrade is. No one's fault, just kind of a strange pairing. Overall, a good segment to continue the feud and get Knight another title retention.
Yeah, I wrote down fine, whatever match. The weirdest thing, though, is that this was basically used to set up Melo Andrade again.
I know, yeah.
When LA Knight is the US champ, and it goes back to what I've been saying for a few weeks now, which is, when is LA Knight going to have something to sink his teeth into?
Right.
He's just kind of doing these like 2-week feuds with Andrade and Melo, but they're doing their own thing. It's just ever since he won the title, like he's been kind of less emphasized than he was before. And that's weird. I want him to have something to like really get into, and you just haven't given him that yet.
Everything you just said is correct. I believe they're taking time to build up the division around him. And that's part of the reason they're going in this direction. And if that's ultimately what happens, then that will be a positive. And I'm okay them taking a step back from LA Knight just a little bit to get more people in the division, to get more challengers for him, more legitimate title holders going forward. This has been badly needed by SmackDown. It's what I was talking about earlier. So if that's the purpose, which we don't know yet, but it seems like it is, then that ultimately will be a positive in the end. Later backstage, Melo complained to Aldis that Andrade distracted and cost him the match. Aldis decided to call for a Game 7, and he basically suggested it will be another number 1 contendership. Just then, Legado del Fantasma came through, with Santos Escobar pointing out that Aldis is simply trading opportunities between Andrade and Hayes, which is facts. It's a really good point by Santos. Aldis reminded that Escobar got a title opportunity of his own, and he fell short. He countered that he wasn't only talking about himself. There's more people in his faction. He basically said, what about Los Garza? Aldis explained he actually already booked them next week against a special team. And if they win that match, getting a title shot should be no problem. The obvious insinuation here is that it's Motor City Machine Guns making their debut. This was made even more obvious by a third vignette featuring 8 Mile, Detroit Rock City images, and spray paint that even briefly flashed MCMG. It ended with next week. And Cole on commentary quickly said it would be a debut. DIY and the Street Profits argued backstage, believing each other cost the tag team titles to the other team. Aldis told them, unfortunately, that was their chance. He's got a new team coming in next week. They continued screaming and arguing at each other, and Aldis didn't really resolve anything in that moment. Bit of a mixed bag here. Obviously, I want Game 7, and I want Legado more involved on SmackDown. And both now are happening. That should be an automatic good. What I didn't love about it was Melo not being enraged, demanding the Game 7, and Aldis insinuating that the winner could get another title shot, when, as Santos pointed out, it had already gone back and forth and kind of been monotonous between them. Knight needs a feud, like you said, Chris, that he can sink his teeth into. He's actually playing the third wheel for a best-of-7 series. Also, while I want Legado back, and I was wondering entering SmackDown like where they'd been after those 2 short vignettes, this smelled to me like they're going right back into the low card without being elevated in any way. You're basically going to feed Los Garza to MCMG. And then I thought the MCMG package was just unnecessarily blatant. But I guess that part really doesn't matter that much, especially since a lot of fans may not be familiar with them at all. On a completely positive note, though, these 3 segments involved 4 teams, which gave credence to my take last week that there appears to be a concerted effort to feature and build this tag team division. And all 4 of these teams are super interesting, at least to me. I cannot say the same about the teams on Raw. So we're getting best of 7. We're getting MCMG. We had DIY and the Profits get into it. Legado's back. Overall, I'm still going with a good for all of this.
Nothing really to add other than to say, yes, they are adding a lot here to SmackDown, which has been needed, which is also why we've said the last couple of weeks have been better. So that is all good.
So thinking about Andrade Mello 7, you have to believe Andrade wins if it's going to be a clean and decisive finish, particularly given Hayes has not really taken any of their matches in a full-fledged, clean victory fashion. What I wonder is if this might be a tease. Maybe they tease the feud finale, we get a no contest, we get a triple threat for the title with Knight, and then they actually run a one-on-one Game 7. I'd prefer that. I think the triple threat is the last unique move they can make in this three-way feud. So I wouldn't hate doing Game 7 undecided. Maybe they don't even go to Game 8, but if they do, go to a Game 8 or a Game 7 redo and then actually let them blow it off after the fact.
Yeah, I hope they get something out of it, because remember that Sheamus Cesaro 7-game feud back in the day that led to the Bar, the tag team that they did.
Right.
So
I don't see them teaming.
No, but this leading to a triple threat or one of them wins the title, like I think that would be something to have, as opposed to just great matches. Like what is next for them coming out of this? And I just kind of hope they have that planned.
Indeed. Pierce had a taped sit-down conversation last Saturday outside the ring in a random location with Bronson Reed. He said he didn't mind taking criticism for letting the roster get a little wild on occasion, but Bronson has put the roster and officials at risk. Reed legitimately apologized for that, but he demanded a Seth Rollins match because his entire motivation of acting this way is to elevate himself into the main event of Raw. They eventually came to an agreement with Pierce basically saying he would grant the match if Rollins agreed. Pierce later told Rollins he was apprehensive about the booking because he's injured every time he fights and it hasn't been a good 2024 for him. Rollins said injuries are part of the game. He understands Reed is trying to make a name for himself and he wants the fight to get revenge and reclaim his spot atop Raw. Pierce didn't make a decision when this ended. Pretty much any time WWE goes outside the ring and outside the arena for a segment, I'm going to lean towards a positive. But given the way Reed's character has been booked and the way his tension with Pierce has progressed, doing it this way hit particularly well. It actually came across like a legitimate conversation outside of work, other than the fact that there was an HD camera and lights on them. And that got me thinking, maybe WWE should start taping rare segments for TV at live events, just to make it look like two guys run into each other, then they have a regular conversation or something like that. Rollins also continued speaking like a regular motivated person rather than playing up the frickin' persona with the laugh and all that bullshit. And there was a lot of credence to what he said as well. It was tough for me to find a flaw in any of this. It was definitely good.
This was good. I really liked the setup. Even Pierce just looked more legitimate kind of doing it this way.
He did, yeah.
Bronson Reed wearing a Big Van Vader shirt was cool.
Mm-hmm.
The only other note I had here was that I'm pretty sure this was 3 straight vignettes we got on Raw, which was weird. We got the American-made promo, then we got the Braun Breaker one, and then we got this. It was a really weird set of things to do in Raw because it had been a while since we'd gotten we had the women's tag match at the beginning of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So that was weird. Did you notice that?
Not only did I notice that, I originally had them grouped together on our breakdown and then ended up splitting them apart. And there was actually a fourth one that happened. Like there was a break, there was like a match, and then they gave us another one after that. So there was 4 in a span of 30 minutes probably that we got. I found it a little bit odd, but at the same time, and I'll mention this later, I liked that WWE said, hey, we only have so much time on this show. Let's get as many people as possible on here, keep storylines going, keep characters going. And I thought this achieved that for Bronson. And it gave us something different than him going in the ring, demanding a match with Rollins, Pierce coming out, them having to get separated. How many times do we have to see that exact same thing? This felt real, not just for Bronson. It felt real for Seth as well. And it made me actually care even more about this feud than I already did. And I cared a lot because they've absolutely knocked it out of the park to this point.
Yeah. And I like that Bronson just explained what he wants and what he's going for. He's not just a big monster destroying people. Like there is thought behind it, and that came across really well.
Now, Chris, did you notice during this segment, and it actually happened earlier during Cody's promo, both Cody and Seth used the word beast, mentioning people they fought and defeated over the last few years?
I did notice that.
Well, obviously the beast, right, when it comes to WWE is the beast incarnate, who is Brock Lesnar. And for those who perhaps are not aware, okay, Brock has not been in WWE since before WrestleMania 40. And the reason for that is twofold. Actually, I should go and give a little bit of backstory. The plan for WrestleMania 40 was to have Gunther against Brock Lesnar. And that was going to be a huge, obviously, huge match. But that got completely scrapped. We thought they were going to go with Gable. Instead, they went with Sammy. We talked about that earlier. The reason why Lesnar has been persona non grata in WWE since then is because he was technically part of the lawsuit filed by Janelle Grant against Vince McMahon. Now, she does not name him in the lawsuit, but journalists kind of uncovered the person that she was speaking about. And the long and short of it, just to give you the basics of what's in there, is Grant alleged after a wrestler signed a new contract, McMahon allegedly texted her saying part of the deal was effing that wrestler. And he gave the wrestler Grant's cell phone number, and the wrestler allegedly asked her to send him a video of herself urinating. Now, of course, like I said, this has been tied to Brock Lesnar. There's no one saying that is absolutely the case, but that is what's being reported.
It was the Wall Street Journal that said their sources said it was Brock. It's not in the lawsuit, right?
Thank you. And of course, Lesnar is still married to the former Rena Mero, who is, I think, Rena Lesnar now. So because he was tangentially related to this lawsuit, he's not being accused of anything. He's not individually being sued, none of that. But because he's tangentially related to the lawsuit, WWE pulled him out of WrestleMania. And of course, we haven't seen him on television since. I believe, Chris, the last time that we saw him was in the SummerSlam match where he, tipped his cowboy hat after the ring imploded and kind of walked off into the sunset. And I find it interesting that WWE is clearly teasing him potentially returning to TV because you're not using the word beast twice by accident. Just like when they were kind of doing all the teases with CM Punk, and I know the story that they're telling where they didn't come to an agreement until right before Survivor Series and he signed the contract backstage. I believe that is true. I don't believe that there was never an inkling of them possibly doing that when they teased his name pretty much every week for like a month and a half going into Survivor Series. So they're clearly testing the waters here with Lesnar. And I guess my question is, would bringing him back be problematic? It will certainly get scorn from the IWC. And certainly Lesnar, assuming this is true, the allegations are true, asking a woman to send a video of herself urinating is certainly not cool, right? At the same,
well, it's not that. It's not specifically that. If we're not kink shaming or anything there. It's that this is part of a sex trafficking.
That's what I was getting situation. To. Right. That's exactly right. Right. So the part that is problematic is the apparent promise from McMahon to Lesnar, but that is also all supposition at this point, right? Like if we're taking it based on what's in the lawsuit and what we actually know, he said to her, hey, part of the deal was you got to F him, right? That could have been flippant that he was saying that. It also could have been absolutely not even in Lesnar's mind that he would want that, right? So McMahon goes, hey, by the way, you got to do this. And Lesnar's like, I don't want that. But he's texting her and he's asking for the video and whatever the case. So on one hand, you can say, hey, innocent until proven guilty, right? Like just because McMahon wanted him to bang her. I can't even believe we're having this conversation. Just because McMahon wanted that to happen didn't mean it was going to, or that Lesnar was going to involve himself or anything like that. But on the other hand, you can say, well, if he did text her for that information or for that content, for that product, then he is culpable and liable in some way that he was part of this and mixed up in it. I don't know how you parse all of that. I don't know that there is a legitimate way to do so. I don't know if the majority of fans will care. I do think there would be a legitimate level of blowback, but at the same time, he's not named in the lawsuit. He's just connected to it through the Wall Street Journal, and he's not accused of anything. So if someone's not accused of something and they're not actually named in a lawsuit, but they're only connected to it through one report, how do you decide as a company whether a person who's going to make you a shitload of money, and we know in wrestling generally when that happens, everything else gets thrown out the window, How do you decide whether it's the right decision to bring that person back? Chris, I don't have the right answer.
I wouldn't do it. Pretty simply because...
Well, I wouldn't do it.
companies-
I'm saying I don't know what WWE will do is what I'm saying.
I'm just saying the company's doing well, like really well. It's not like they need him, and bringing him so far since the lawsuit, WWE has tried to completely distance itself from all the allegations. WWE itself is a named defendant in the lawsuit,
Right.
and whether it's the Vince McMahon doc or the various things that have come up, there was another press release put out by Janelle Grant's lawyers today. They are not even barely acknowledging that. Like they're trying to almost erase Vince sort of from some certain things like what they did at WrestleMania 40. If Brock comes back, all those headlines are back. And the next time Triple H does a press conference, he's going to be asked about it. And based on his recent track record, maybe not give a good answer about it. So I don't see any upside here. If I'm WWE, is not worth the downside. And if you're WWE and your lawyers know that this is indeed Brock, you absolutely should not be touching that. So I would be shocked. I honestly, I'll be shocked because they've been saying Beast. I just think it would be a very poor decision for WWE if they did that.
Yeah, it's so tough. I mean, business is great. They don't need him. At the same time, Lesnar's going to pop fans in a significant manner. They have big shows coming up. They want to bring big names back. It seems like Goldberg is coming back for something. Maybe their goal is to run the Gunther feud. Man, you're right.
Well, also,
you're right from the standpoint, Chris.
Remember, by the way,
you and I wouldn't do it. You and I would not do it under pretty much any circumstances. Maybe if enough time elapsed and he was somehow cleared of it, or he came out with a statement and said, look, I know that I've been connected to this, but I never had an intention to do this. I sent one stupid text, blah, blah, blah. Maybe if something like that happened, I could see a way of working him in inside of the next year. But as things currently stand, to just bring him back with none of that, I don't really think they can do it.
And remember, at Paul Heyman's Hall of Fame induction, there was no Brock Lesnar in that video.
Right.
It was Paul Heyman bringing it up and saying it himself. So, but it seemed pretty clear that WWE did not want anything to do with that. Again, the allegations all over that lawsuit are horrific.
Of course.
I just see no great upside to bringing him back. I really don't think they should.
The negative press and reaction should outweigh whatever business benefits would come with bringing him back. That's the best way to probably put it. All right, let's move on to the women's tag team. Quite a transition from that to the women's tag team championships. Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill fought Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson on SmackDown. The NXT duo got a promo package to introduce themselves. Pretty solid, all things considered, though they said they earned the opportunity through NXT, despite really kind of just challenging. They didn't actually earn the match. Trick Williams was front row watching his girlfriend, who, by the way, is Lash, for those who don't know that. Chelsea Green and Piper Niven were ringside watching with Cole, still selling Chelsea's smell. That happened due to a confrontation between the teams backstage, the Chelsea and Piper being ringside. Jackson did a cool flip senton, kneeling on Legend's shoulders. Then they hit a tandem wheelbarrow cutter for a broken fall. Green got involved with the Metaphor Girls ringside, taking a huge boot by Legend. Jackson then took the still unnamed finisher from the champions to retain the titles in just over 2 minutes. So Legend and Jackson got their entrance interrupted by the men, then got squashed in a title match. Yeah, they got shine. They hit those 2 moves, and Legend actually kind of beasted Belair in a couple spots. But that was the entirety of the wrestling. Why the fuck are you even booking this if you're not giving them 6 or 7 minutes to actually get over? Take 5 minutes off that Bloodline main event match, and the whole show is improved for it. What did this accomplish other than building the additional feud with Chelsea and Piper? That certainly did not need a squash match against other people for setup purposes. I guess it could have been worse, so it does avoid ugly, but it was absolutely bad. There were a lot of people seriously looking forward to this match, myself included, and ultimately at the end, I just found it to be really shitty all around.
This is crap!
Yeah, this was really disappointing, especially because they did do a vignette of them before the commercial. It's like, oh, like I'm getting excited for this. Now I know who these people are, and then we don't get their entrance, and the match is nothing. Lash Legend has beaten Bianca Belair's like training records at the Performance Center down
Absolutely.
in Florida.
Total beast.
They're both really good. From what I saw from them, I was like, oh, we got some real tag team moves and stuff here. I don't watch a lot of NXT, but I was really intrigued by them, and I was really disappointed for that to be the match.
Great.
Bad.
Now, a slightly different take came from Jack Walker at Warriors_fan on Twitter, who I've not really seen reply to us before. So maybe first time writer, first time commenter here. He wrote, I don't watch much NXT, so that's the first time I've noticed the Meta Girls, and now I want to see more. You know, maybe if others felt like him, there was some benefit to it. But just imagine if you got a decent length match, even a short one. I bet people would be pining for that even more than they already were. For the time they did get, like you said, like I said, they had a couple impressive moves. It was just simply tough to buy into them that much given the circumstances. And another complaint I have here, I am totally done. I cannot stress this enough. Totally done with the smelly Chelsea stuff. It was funny last week, and it was still comical at Bad Blood, which was one day later. I know it's just an annoying heel getting her comeuppance from faces who are teasing and mocking her, but I really don't need this continuing next week. You want to stretch it for 1 week? Fine. I was okay with it Friday. Going past that becomes Vince McMahon lowbrow comedy territory, and we don't need that, even if Chelsea is good with it. She is so much better than that, and she could easily move and create a different part of her annoying character, and they can move off of it. I almost hope someone says that she slaps them, and then like it doesn't get said again.
Yeah, like Chelsea and Piper have been doing really, really good stuff, but like advance them. Don't keep pulling her down because it's working. You know, that's what I don't want to see.
Right. Like she had that huge moment at Money in the Bank, and it was okay that she lost. And it was okay that she lost the dumpster match because her character can lose. But she looked great in all of these situations, right? She actually showed out, and she has momentum behind her. Reducing her to a smelly Chelsea character, like it is the absolute opposite of what they should be doing. Now, there was another women's tag team match over on Raw, Belair and Cargill against Damage Control. Jade's entrance was different and less impactful for some reason. They didn't do the lights out, the camera from below. I don't understand why. The Metaphor ladies were ringside despite already losing to the champions. But to be fair, while it was strange, commentary did explain it. There was a fun mini rivalry with Kairi Sane and Cargill, just given their size differential, especially since Kairi actually dominated Jade until it looked like she broke her back over her knee, which was crazy. Sane avoided.
That was a crazy spot.
Right? It was that, wasn't that, didn't that really pop out? Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
It looked like she bent her in half and broke her back. It was crazy the way she bent over. Sane avoided the tandem inverted slam before hitting an assisted pop-up insane elbow on Belair, which was awesome. She avoided over the moonsault, but hit a springboard outside. Lash then just slugged Io Sky in the face, with the referee somehow missing it, I guess I couldn't figure out why she did it, but she did. Then Jade took her off the apron for a vertical suplex. Bianca took her off the apron for a vertical suplex, only to move it into Kiss of Death, a really good KOD, by the way, to retain the titles in like 11 or 12 minutes. To say this was better than the SmackDown match would be a massive understatement. I mean, getting 6 times as much run actually helped, of course, but there were a bunch of unique sequences and fun women's tag action here. The presence of Metaphor, it kind of made little sense because in kayfabe, their match already happened and they lost. It would have fit better in like the opposite order, the real order it was taped. Outside of that oddity, everyone looked strong in the match. Damage Control got an excused loss. The segment was definitely good. And guess what? Now you have the Metaphor ladies, the champions, Damage Control. You have Chelsea and Piper, obviously Pure Fusion, the KCs. There's a lot of women's tag teams, and they're being featured and they're getting rotated, and it's pretty damn interesting.
Yep. I also thought Io lifting Kairi up into the elbow.
That was awesome.
An awesome spot. I don't know if they've done that spot before or not.
They have, but they don't do it every time, which makes it special.
Yeah, that was great. This was fantastic. This was awesome match. Some great spots. Women's tag team wrestling showing out. Everything you want to see. This was good.
And let me be clear. I have no problems with the champions. I'm glad the division is getting featured more. Everything I just said, that's positive. But it has, Chris, kind of just been Bianca and Jade doing matches and looking strong. They need to get involved in a storyline. Something beyond 2 other women simply wanting to challenge for the titles.
Yes, they do. That's been a problem basically for the entire history of these belts.
Right. it's like more time, positive, still not doing the storyline aspect. So hopefully they get over to that. American Made got a promo package led by Chad Gable defining their team. Brutus Creed continued his asshole varsity jock character, and it hit overall with them being self-important jackasses. Super cheesy, but on purpose. Braun Breaker then got a promo package saying he attacked Jey Uso because Jey hit the lottery when beating him, and he never reciprocated the respect 2 weeks ago. Breaker said they aren't the same because his family isn't around helping him achieve like Jey's family carried him throughout his entire career. The logic on the first part with the respect was rough. The latter part, I loved. That made a lot of sense. Braun's promo was exceptionally strong, just the way he delivered it once again. Dragon Lee got a partially animated CGI vignette saying his first year in WWE has not been easy. He's dealt with many setbacks, but he's capable of exceeding even the greatest expectations and proving that not even the sky is his limit. I'm glad they got him on screen. Where he fits in, I'm not totally sure. They're putting him in the tag team tournament with Rey Mysterio, even though LWO has a tag team as part of its group. That's odd. But combining all of these, I will give an overall good. It was a quick way to get a lot of talent on screen and continue developing characters.
I did really laugh during the American Made promo when one of the Creeds says, Merriam-Webster, you idiot.
Brutus, yeah, it's hysterical.
Yeah, I thought that was a great spot that was just like meant to just be turned into a meme. That was really funny. Braun was great. I love how he's emphasizing, like, I'm not relying on my family like you are. Like you want, and he said, you want to do it on your own, you're going to take this ass kicking on your own. Great line. Dragon Lee, sure, whatever. I don't care.
All right. Fair enough. So it's good overall, though, for you.
Yes.
Kofi Kingston fought Breaker. Only a small part of a longer New Day backstage confrontation from last week was shown. That was unfortunate because it was good and it developed their story. Xavier Woods was not ringside with Kofi at the bell. Kingston missed Trouble in Paradise, but hit most of an SOS. Breaker caught him flying for an overhead belly-to-belly suplex, then hit the super spear to beat the former WWE champion. Commentary really should have explained that to sell the victory. He just beat a former WWE champion. They didn't do that. In fact, I wish that Kofi took a spear, kicked out, and then needed the super spear. I also hate the name super spear. It's stupid. Give it a name if you have to give it something. He just ran the ropes, just a little bit extra. Woods ultimately prevented a post-match attack, only to get blindsided himself. Jey saved with a spear of his own and a super kick to take Braun off the apron. X still did not shake his hand, which would have made more sense if the entire backstage segment from last week actually aired. The crowd was pretty dead for all of this, but it was also the 4th hour of taping, so I really do not blame them. It wasn't overly noteworthy. I expected better from both guys, but at the same time, there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. I actually just wish commentary hit that former champion point. I'm going to say a light good.
Yeah, it was light good. I just wrote, it was fine in my notes. You could have emphasized a bit more, but they did everything they needed to do. And I think with New Day, we're kind of just waiting on the Xavier Kofi stuff.
All right. R-Truth fought The Miz. There was a Wyatt 6 feed interruption after the bell. Final Testament also walked down, which distracted Miz and allowed R-Truth to roll him up for the 1, 2, 3. This is, by the way, it was in seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Truth hugged Miz and he hugged the referee, celebrating, only to get out of dodge. Karrion Kross and Scarlett played like they were happy for him. In fact, Kross even dapped Truth up. But once he ran past them, Kross ordered Truth to get thrown back into the ring. AOP grabbed him, threw him into the ring, and Miz hit skull-crushing finale. I get what they were doing here. The random combination of Miz and Kross's crew, it actually could be interesting, especially up against the 6. But as a one-off segment on this show, I gotta go with a light bad. I just really didn't care about it.
Yeah, I've been like intrigued by this idea, but it's kind of not going where I thought it was going to go with Miz.
Right.
They did another Wyatt 6 bit. I'm also going to go light bad.
The stuff with Karrion Kross that is interesting is happening on social media. And then when they get to TV, it's just, he's there, really.
Yeah.
So to wrap all this up, Chris, coming out of TV this week, I can't help but wonder how this crown jewel card is going to be built. I know we're still a ways off technically from the show, but you have 2 set Blood Money belt matches. And then what? Last year had 7 matches plus the pre-show, which had 1. Maybe they run Kevin Owens, Randy Orton as a singles. A United States triple threat is possible. I mentioned that earlier. Women's tag team title match seems obvious. They'll just throw a team. Maybe Chelsea and Piper get that chance. They could run Seth Rollins and Bronson Reed. That would be 6. World tag team title match with the winners of the tournament. That would get us to 7. But that's assuming all of those happen on the show. WWE has been putting a ton of title matches on TV recently. It just feels like this is going to be a really awkward PLE from a card standpoint, especially with those 2 main events.
Yeah, it's because you're taking out, you could, instead of having 4 title matches or 3, you can only have 2 of your world titles.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of got to go off of that. And then you could probably throw a US title thing on there and maybe an IC, but it's interesting if this is going to be the big sell, the 2 title matches for the made up title. I don't know what else you kind of put around that, because those are supposed to be bigger than a world title match.
Right. And it would look, let's be honest, and this is no diss to Liv and no diss to Nia, right? But it's not like we're getting Becky and Charlotte in that match, or Becky and Bianca or something. Like, it's 2 of the upper mid-card women who happen to be champions right now, leading a big money or a blood money belt. I almost called it a big money belt, a blood money belt match, which doesn't really compare to Cody Rhodes and Gunther, who are legit top main event men, right? It's a very B co-main event, whereas the other is a clear A. It's not 1A and 1B. So that's kind of part of it, I think. And also the fact that there's really not that much else going on with the women other than that. The women's tag team division, like we said, there's a lot of people involved in it, and it has a chance to be really interesting. And maybe things will change over the next 3 weeks, and we look at the card when we do our ultimate preview and say, hey, this actually could be a pretty damn good show. But I'll say, even compared to last year, which the main event, by the way, was Roman Reigns and LA Knight, and we knew Knight wasn't going to win the title, but still that was a huge match. It's just kind of not living up the same way as that did. And it's certainly not living up, I would say, Chris, to King and Queen of the Ring, which I thought was a super interesting and really well done Blood Money in the Sand show.
There's just no like hot feuds going on right now, And so it's
the hottest feud won't be on the show. The hottest feud is Cody and KO.
Yes, which is barely even started.
Right. All right. Well, look, we were going to do the last word. We don't have a time limit on the show, but we do want to keep it at a certain length. We're going to go ahead and save that for a future week. I've noticed that we've actually run through many of our last word questions. So if you guys want to send them in, Jerome's, you absolutely can. At Getting Overcast on Twitter, gettingoverpod@gmail.com. They can be wrestling related. They cannot be wrestling related. In fact, we generally prefer when they're not, because it's supposed to be a fun segment that allows us to speak about something other than WWE. So again, gettingoverpod@gmail.com, at Getting Overcast on Twitter. As always, thanks to Vintage Chris Vanini for joining the show. On the way out, allow me to remind you, the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave those 5-star ratings on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it live right here on the show. We're like 31 reviews away from 500, and we will stop asking as much once we hit that number. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year. You can get instant reaction audio. It's called the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling. We do that after every major TV show. You can also get exclusive news analysis posts on Friday. Again, $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. Support the continuation of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast and subscribe on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Thanks once again to Vintage Chris Vanini for joining and breaking down the entire week in WWE. We will be back on Thursday with a second look at AEW Wrestle Dream and breaking down the week in NXT. For Vintage, this is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.